agriculture represents a massive shift in human activity. Hunter-gatherers adapted themselves to the resources provided by the environment, right? But agriculturalists increasingly adapted the environment to suit their needs. Forcing the environment to adapt to humans became an increasingly big deal until, like today, when it is arguably the biggest deal of all. Now, all that being said, the advent of agriculture didn't immediately lead to wars and cities and kings and funny hats. In fact, another 5,000 years would pass before the first states emerged. So for the first half of the agrarian era, humans lived in a world of villages with transient herders and foragers in the gaps between.
Giving up foraging and settling down did have some downsides in the form of back-breaking labor and diseases moving easily among denser and more numerous populations, but farming allowed humans to support a much larger number of people within a much smaller land area than foraging. This was very good for collective learning, which relies on both the number of potential innovators and the close connectivity between them. The world population had grown from roughly 6 million people at the beginning of agriculture to 50 million by the emergence of states 5,000 years ago. States did eventually appear, but not all states emerged at once, any more than all agriculture emerged at once. Agriculture first emerged in the Fertile Crescent in Egypt around 11,000 years ago, and then in East Asia and Papua New Guinea around 9,000 years ago. Agriculture emerged in West Africa and the Americas around 5,000 years ago, though estimates definitely vary for the Americas. Accordingly, the first states to arise were in the Middle East, where agriculture first emerged, followed shortly by the Chinese and Indus Valley civilizations. Papua New Guinea may have invented agriculture around the same time, but they never developed enough agricultural surplus to support states. So yeah, in every world zone, the invention of agriculture was a precursor for the rise of states. The key to having a state is agrarian surplus. If you produce enough food, you can have a class of people who don't need to farm. They can then fulfill other duties in this increasingly numerous and complex society, whether they be leaders or judges who settle disputes, bureaucrats who deal with administration and infrastructure, doctors who heal the sick, priests who make sacrifices to vengeful gods, or soldiers who provide security, or at least extract a portion of the agricultural surplus for the leadership through some kind of taxation. And with more people filling new jobs and generating new ideas about them, this is also good news for collective learning. Diversification of labor is also the first step of early states toward hierarchies and classes, aristocrats and popular and despotic kings and pharaohs and sultans, shahs and emperors. It also meant the first divisions into unequal, unfair, and undemocratic hierarchies, dividing man from man, man from woman, and the high from the low.
So the beautiful thing about being able to remember and accumulate the ideas of your ancestors is that some of their ideas are great for agriculture, also other things, but mostly food. Whether it's new forms of irrigation invented in ancient Mesopotamia or the four-crop rotation that gradually proliferated across Europe in the 17th and 18th centuries, these innovations increased the number of potential innovators who could exist in a social order without starving. And there were also great innovative leaps in connectivity. For instance, the invention of writing in ancient states about 5,000 years ago, like starting from a bureaucratic form of accounting, mostly to count livestock, to an art largely enjoyed by the elite. Writing gradually communicated more abstract and complex ideas. And those ideas became available to more and more people as more people could read, until eventually writing became so popular that these days everyone writes books, even some of your Crash Course Big History hosts. We also like writing because it made it less likely that things we'd learned would be forgotten. Like when people started to write down what they knew, that knowledge became set in stone, sometimes literally. And then with the invention of printing in China and later Korea and the printing press in Europe, more writing could be produced and circulated more quickly and often more cheaply than books copied out by hand. All of this turned into a beneficial feedback cycle. Potential innovators raise the carrying capacity of the population. More people go on to produce more ideas, which raises the carrying capacity of the population, which in turn produces more potential innovators. And we can do it all without anything bad happening to the environment. What's that? Oh my. So throughout the agrarian period, collective learning continued to raise the carrying capacity of the world. Populations grew from 6 million 10,000 years ago to 50 million by the dawn of states to 120 million by 1000 BCE in the midst of classical civilizations. By the end of the agrarian era and the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, 954 million people lived on the earth. But while collective learning gradually raised the carrying capacity in the agrarian era, it did not keep pace with population growth, and this is a significant problem with humanity. Just like any other animals in nature, we breed until we strain the resources of our environment, so we are prone toward unsustainable levels of overpopulation. So every 2 or 3 centuries, humans would hit the carrying capacity, and then the population would recoil, resulting in famine, disease, cycles of prosperity, strain, crisis, and civil infighting repeated themselves. And I do worry a little bit that when we talk about traditional history, we don't do it enough in the context of carrying capacity. We are, after all, organisms, and we behave a lot like other animals on this planet. We want there to be more of us, and we want more resources for that more of us to enjoy.